Good morning. Roland S. Martin is a journalist who has always maintained a clear sense of his calling in this world. He is the host and managing editor of Roland Martin Unfiltered, the first daily online show in history focused on news and analysis of politics, entertainment, sports, and culture from an explicitly African-American perspective. He is the author of 3 books, Listening to the Spirit Within, 50 Perspectives on Faith. Speak, Brother, a Black Man's View of America, and the first, President Barack Obama's Road to the White House, as originally reported by Roland S. Martin. 4 times, Ebony magazine has named him one of the most influential African Americans in this country, and has appeared several times on the Route 100's annual list of influential African Americans. Over the course of his career, he has been showed with more than 30 awards, including the National Association of Black Journalists 2013 Journalist of the Year, the 2008 National Association of Black Journalists President's Award. He was inducted into Texas A&M University Journalism Hall of Honor and is a 4-time NAACP Image Award winner. Prior to creating his own platform, Mr. Martin contributed 6 years to CNN, 13 years on TV One hosting Washington Watch and News One Now. He also hosted a radio talk show, served as executive editor and general manager of the Chicago Defender, the founding news editor for Savoy Magazine, and BlackAmericaWeb.com. He also worked for a host of additional media platforms, including the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, the Austin American-Statesman, and has written for both Ebony and Essence magazine. The life member of the National Association of Black Journalists and the first and finest Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Has been awarded honorary degrees from Florida Memorial University, the University of Maryland University College, Lemoyne-Owen College, Lane College, South Carolina State University, and Virginia University of Lynchburg. He and his wife, Reverend Jackie Hood Martin, reside in the Washington, D.C. area. Without further ado, please help me welcome my fraternity brother, Mr. Roland S. Martin.
All right, so how we doing? Good? Certainly glad to be here, glad to see everyone here on this morning. It is when I walked in, Congresswoman Adams, she said, "Oh, you got A&T colors on." I said, "No, I got Alpha colors on." I just want to go ahead and let folks know. I understand you got half of it right, but I want to let her know. And when the brother did the introduction, I appreciate that. I certainly heard some moans and groans from people who couldn't get in. So let me just go ahead and just get a couple of things straight for those of you who belong to those youth organizations. First, I don't mind omegas and kappas and sigmas and iotas, but remember, alpha's your daddy. Just in case anybody's confused. Omegas shouldn't say nothing because y'all took one of our colors. You couldn't even be original. See, here's the deal. You should not moan and groan before the speaker speaks. You never talk trash before the speech. You do it after, when I don't have the microphone and we are not live streaming. That's why the rest of y'all frats ain't smart. See, Alpha know how to be quiet before the speaker talks. I'm just saying, so y'all gonna learn that next time, huh? On that note, let me also give a shout out to the General President of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, Dr. Everett Ward, who is with us. Dr. Ward, please stand up. He is certainly providing the leadership we need, not only for the fraternity, but also leads the Panhellenic Council as well, which makes up all of our fraternities and sororities. For those of y'all who are not members, we do this for fun all the time, but I'm dead serious. Chancellor, glad to have you here as well. Another Alpha brother. Something just consistent. I'm just letting y'all know. And it's good to see everyone here, Congresswoman, Congressman. I've had both of you on my shows, and so we thank you for your leadership. When I was, they were running outside. They were like, "Yo, they're introducing you." I'm like, "Don't worry about it. They're gonna take a while. Don't worry about it." And what I was doing was, you heard me mention that before I launched my own platform, and I'm going to speak a little bit about that before I get to my remarks, and that is, I appreciate all of the people who watched Washington Watch for 4 years on TV One, who watched News One Now, which was the first morning show targeting African Americans on a black cable network. We appreciate that. 11 years on Tom Joyner Morning Show, and so many people, they come up to me and they talk about how they miss it and folk, when you'll get another show. But the reality is, September 2018, I launched my own digital show. Now, the operative word there is not that I launched a digital show. I said my own digital show. The reason why that is important is because I don't ask somebody else, can I? I ask myself. Now, why is that important? As important is because here we are in 2020, and if you actually understand the history of African Americans, were it not for black-owned media, we would not have had platforms that were covering our issues when daily newspapers would not even put us in the paper, would not even cover African Americans who got married, or when we had birthdays. They would only cover folks when they were arrested for crimes. And so were it not for the likes of the North Star and Robert Abbott's the Chicago Defender, as well as A.I. Scott's the Atlanta Daily World, Claude Burnett's Negro Associated Press, the Pittsburgh Courier, Ebony, and Jet, you would not have had the coverage, if you will, of what took place. In fact, if you look at the Black Freedom Movement, some call the Civil Rights Movement, before the New York Times and Time and Newsweek showed up, it was black newspapers that were covering what was taking place. Dr. King, before he became a national figure, was writing a monthly column for Ebony magazine. And I'm saying all of that is because we are facing an existential threat, and that is we are moving towards a point when we will be a foundation majority people of color, and yet we're seeing the dwindling of our voices that are black owned. And what we do see right now are a proliferation of websites that focus on entertainment and gossip. And I have nothing against entertainment. We cover those things as well. But no group of people can survive if the only thing being covered is what some entertainer is saying or doing or wearing. And so when we launched the digital platform, Roland Martin Unfiltered, maximizing the social media following, I have about 2.5 million. There are people who are telling me, man, but you should go to MSNBC or go to CNN, and that's important. And I had to explain to them, I said, yeah, but that's somebody else deciding what the story is, what the subjects are, who the guests are, and we're just bit players in that. And as somebody who has run 3 black newspapers, meaning I had complete editorial control, who has run shows, I understand the power when it was in your hand when you are deciding what's the story and then who gets coverage. So when Republicans in Congress were holding up the money for HBCUs, you did not see that story every single day on MSNBC or CNN or Fox News, but you did see us covering it every single day. When you look at the stories dealing that impact us on a daily basis, that's why we do it every single day. In fact, why is it also important when you have your own platform? When you turn on those other platforms, and when you see Angela Rye on CNN or Gianna Caldwell on Fox News or Paul Butler on MSNBC, and I can name some 25 other people, what you should ask is, where did they first make their national television appearances? And it was on shows that I ran. So why is that important? It's important because those networks would not have called a single one of those folks had they not seen them somewhere else speaking truth to power. So therefore, if you don't have the platform, you cannot create the opportunity and the space for the next generation to be able to show who they are, because they're not going to take the opportunity to provide them the learning ground to be able to do that. And so that's why it's important. So when I turn the networks on and I see literally 30 plus people who I put on, folks say, aren't you upset? I said, no. I said, in fact, I tweeted one day to CNN's President Jeff Zucker, y'all can hire everybody who I've had on my show, and I'm going to bring in a whole new crop. And then if y'all hire them, that's fine. I'm going to find a whole new crop. Because, see, I understand what these largely white-run networks don't understand, that there's immense African-American talent all across this country if only they have an opportunity. So in that first year, we did 100.7 million views, 345 million minutes watched, increased our YouTube channel by 280,000 subscribers. And again, the operative phrase is own. So when we decide what we're going to cover, so when I was in Ghana for 10 days last month, we're putting together two-hour specials of the year of return. And of course, we're live streaming this event, and we cover other events. On Monday and Tuesday, there's an emergency meeting of National African American Leadership Summit taking place in Washington, D.C. And Karen Bass, the Congresswoman of the Congressional Black Caucus, called me and she said, I want you to MC one of the events, but could you also live stream the event? I said, absolutely. Why? Because C-SPAN will not be there. CNN and ABC and NBC and CBS will not be there. But there's information that will be discussed there that we have to have. And if you do not have a platform that we own and control, then we are facing the possibility of asking somebody else to tell our story. And that is always dangerous. And so we thank those of you who watch. It's very simple. Y'all, many of y'all help. Y'all got some older folks in your family who have no idea. They're like, how can I watch you? So I need y'all to go home, set their phones up. It can pop up right on their phone so they can see. I even got my 72-year-old daddy who watches my show through Apple TV on the big screen. He's like, phone too small. I'm like, don't worry about it. So we appreciate all the support, Roland Martin Unfiltered. And you will hear an announcement we'll make in a couple of months about something else that we are launching that is really, really important. Let's get to the task at hand. I want to speak from the subject. First of all, anytime you speak to this many black people who go to church, you have to tag your text. Now, some of y'all are looking at me right now saying, I have no idea what tag your text means, which means you probably one of the people who don't go to church. So if you're looking at me right now saying, what is tag your text, just lean over to the black person or the white person sitting next to you and say, do you know what tag your text means? before I embarrass you with that quizzical look on your face like I have no idea what that means. Let me tag this text. You don't need permission to stand up. You don't need permission to stand up. One of the phrases that I abhor is when I hear young folks say, when are y'all gonna hand the baton and get out the way? I hate that phrase. I remember the 30th anniversary of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, and I was reading a story in the Washington Post, and they were quoting all of these young folks between 18 and 22, and they were complaining, saying, when are these folks going to pass the baton and get out of the way? I hear that all the time when I travel around the country. People ask me those things as well, and they say, I just wish these old folks would just get out the way and pass the baton. And then I have to ask them, I said, well, first and foremost, do you have the capacity to actually run and complete a race? Now, I'm sure right now that somebody's like, oh man, why do we have to invite a speaker who hating on young folk? No, I'm not hating on young folks. What I want to unpack is why that is a nonsensical and dangerous phrase. It is because when you say that, what you're doing is, and in fact, what's interesting is, it's really a phrase that I largely only hear in our community. If you truly study not only African American history, but if you study African history, then you will understand is there has always been great reverence paid to elders. I said I was just in Ghana last month for 10 days. It was the second time that I've been to Ghana for a 10-day period. And we were at a naming ceremony, and it was quite interesting because they introduced me to the king, introduced me to the queen mother. Yet before the king would speak, before the chief would speak, he would look over to the elders to get permission before he spoke. Now think about that. Here is the chief who's over all these subjects in an area. Yet before the chief would speak, the chief would look to the elders to get permission before he could start. Because he understood that before he became chief, there were some people who were there who made it possible for there to be something for him to be a chief of before he became a leader. And so we play a dangerous game where we want to sideline people who can provide knowledge, resources, and a valuable experience to whatever it is that is happening. And so by trying to sideline them, what we're actually doing is cutting off a significant and vast resource that can help us face a difficult situation. Now, there's also responsibility, and that is for those who are elders to also not try to constrain the energy and the passion of folk who are younger. See, the real deal is, if you want to do this thing properly, both forces must be operating at the exact same time, going to the same destination. I liken this to driving. I liken this to driving. When I'm on a highway, there's a fast lane. And for folk who can't drive in a fast lane, I need you to get over so folks can drive in the fast lane to get there. But the deal is here, whether you're in the fast lane or the other lanes, you're going to end up at the destination eventually. Some folk might get there faster than others, but it does not mean that one is better than the other. That really explains to me where we are in terms of how we should be operating. So therefore, you can be in the fast lane, you can walk fast, you can run fast, but some folk going to take their time. And so when you got that sister who's got a cane or a scooter, she's going to take her time, but I guarantee you when she get there, she's still going to have something to say. So we cannot say she's irrelevant, because if you actually look at our history, were it not for those folks who were in slow lanes, who could not run as fast or walk as fast, but what they did have was they had tenacity, and when other folk who were running fast got tired, they were still there. I think about folks coming to me all the time, and I had a brother on Twitter the other day. He said, it's time for these. I was discussing Joe Biden, and people, they would like, I don't understand why all these older black folks are supporting Joe Biden. And so I was trying to explain to folks on television why that was the case. And this one brother jumped on Twitter. He said, I just wish all these old folks just got the way and let young folks just vote. And I started laughing. I said, you don't. Now, again, I'm not hating, I'm stating. What I tried to explain to him was, if you actually look at who votes, folks who are 65 plus vote. They don't need to be tickled. They don't need to be made to feel good. They don't need you to excite them. In 2018, I was with Melody Campbell, the National Coalition of Black Civic Participation, and they were making phone calls to Florida, and they had this whole phone bank going, and they called this one sister. She was 77, and the woman was talking. She said, baby, just stop. She said, you don't need to waste none of your breath. I've already arranged for my daughter to come pick me up on election day. She's going to come pick me up at this time. I'm going to vote. I'm coming back. So you can go ahead and call somebody else. Baby, I got this. And the one was kind of like, she said, it's okay. Call somebody else. Mama already gonna vote. And I had to try to explain this to this young brother. I said, because you might have demographic numbers, but demographic numbers don't mean nothing if you're not registered. And even if you are registered, it means nothing if you then don't vote. I'm born and raised in Texas, and when I look at 2.1 million Latinos who are eligible but unregistered to vote, demographic numbers don't mean nothing if it doesn't translate into electoral power. And so I was trying to get this young brother to understand that you cannot negate the power of older folks who vote. I said, and if you want to be a difference maker, you got to turn out the same way they do. And then he began to understand, because I showed him based upon the numbers exactly how this all plays out. The reason that is important when I speak to this whole issue of you don't need permission, and it was interesting listening to the introductions of the four young men who launched this sit-in. One of them asked their parents for permission. If you really go back and look at our history, and look at even parents, and look at HBCU presidents, there were a whole bunch of leaders, parents and HBCU presidents, who were actually telling all those young black folks who were in the Black Freedom Movement not to get involved. In fact, there were folks who actually were kicked out of HBCUs because they dared to fight in the civil rights movement. See, those were the folks who were not asking permission to lead. And the reason you don't have to ask permission to lead, and I understand what those one of the brothers did when they asked mom and daddy, I totally understand that, because look, you got black parents who are like, look, we done all this work. You are not gonna go to school and lose your damn mind and get kicked out and not have a job, and no, that's not gonna happen. And there's a certain safety and comfort in that because of how we were raised, and our parents want us to do better towards the next generation. But some folk understand that you have to do some things because it is right and it is just, and not about whether or not I'm able to get a job later. Later, I'm talking to Bob Brown, worked with Dr. King, and later went to work for President Richard Nixon, and worked with Nelson Mandela. And what's interesting about that is we talked today about the apartheid movement and how it was brought down, African National Congress. We talk about the divestment, and so many people run around talking about, well, all these protests that happen on college campuses at Harvard and HBCUs and Howard and others protesting apartheid. But what folk don't want to deal with is that the investment the divestment strategy did not start with college students on the college campus. It started because there was a brother named Ken Williams who walked into Polaroid, and he saw in the lobby there was this Polaroid book, and it was a pass book. And then he discovered that when they were demanding that black folks would show their papers in South Africa, that they were actually holding up a photo book that was produced by the Polaroid subsidiary in South Africa. And Ken Williams said, this is grossly unfair, and he said we shouldn't be doing this. And then he recruited, was talking to some other people, and all of a sudden this other sister, she began to work with him, Carolyn Williams, and they began to work on this whole deal. And here she was, 26 years old, recent chemistry graduate. Her mama said, baby, what are you doing? Look, you went to school and you got all that schooling. You got you a good job at Polaroid. She said, mama, but these folks are giving black folks hell in South Africa, and I can't work at a company that's profiting off of that. And so Carolyn then began to stand with Ken, and they eventually got fired from Polaroid. And then they then went to Washington, D.C., and then had a meeting with several members of the Congressional Black Caucus. And see, today, again, we talk about Congressman John Conyers, the late Congressman John Conyers, and the late Congressman Ron Dellums, and what they did in terms of fighting apartheid and being on the front lines. Yet when Mandela died, I had Ron Dellums on my show. Ron Dellums said me and John were not aware of what Polaroid was doing until Ken and Carolyn then came and met with us, and they educated the CBC on what was happening. And so that thing began to take off in that bill. And so if you go to Google and you Google Polaroid revolutionary workers, you will discover that the divestment campaign that really led, put the economic stranglehold on apartheid that caused it to come down was started by those two black folks at Polaroid because they dared not to ask permission. For so many of us, we see injustices taking place every single day in our cities, in our state, and in this country. And there are people who are saying, man, something needs to be done. But then there are folks who say, yeah, I hope somebody else do it. But if you look at the history of black folks in this country, there's been nothing we have ever gotten because it just happened. Nothing. Every single thing that African Americans have gotten in this country has been because we've had to raise hell, protest, agitate, push, prod, let folks know we're not going to back down. And so that is simply who we are. And so one of the mistakes of the post-civil rights movement generation, I was born November 14, 1968, I'm in that generation, is that too many of our parents did not want us getting involved in various issues because they said, baby, I did all the fighting that was needed. But we see today in 2020, when you saw the Shelby v. Holder decision that took place in the Supreme Court that gutted Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act, and then you had Republican-led legislatures all across the South put in place onerous voter support. Do you understand? I don't need the mic. The reason that is important because the moment the Supreme Court issued that ruling, you saw Republican-led legislatures all across the South pass laws that were stopping folks from voting. How is it that in 2020 you have 1,200 voting locations that have been shut down all across the South? It is because of the power of us going to the ballot box. When you see what began to take place, and not just voter ID, not just closing down of all of those different polling locations, but you begin to see all the rules begin to put in place, and you begin to see the political gerrymandering, you begin to see all of those things, you begin to understand in terms of what happened, because don't nobody work that hard to stop us from voting if they don't understand the power of our vote. And see, for me, it's not a question of picking on one party or the other, because that was a time when black folks voted Republican, when Democrats were not supportive of civil rights, and things began to change when it came to Hoover, when it came to Wilson, when it came to FDR, and then Truman and Eisenhower, then Kennedy, then LBJ, and then Nixon, and then of course, you had Carter. I can go on and on and on. Those things began to change because folk begin to understand that we were unwilling to sit idly by and allow the issues that we cared about to go unaddressed, for folks to ignore in terms of what we cared about. And so we begin to say, no, you are going to have to reckon with us at the ballot box. And that's why you see today folks who are upset. It was in this state where all of a sudden black folks turned out in significant numbers in 2008, and Obama won North Carolina about 14,100 votes. And then folks begin to change the very laws to stop that from happening. How in the world can you have individuals, I don't care what party, dare stand up and talk about our troops and talk about supporting our troops and talk about first responders? If you are willing to talk about our troops fighting for American values, what is more American and valuable than the right to vote? And if you are stopping folks from using it, then you are not an American. When Bill O'Reilly was on Fox News while he was sitting there sexually harassing women, he had the audacity, the unmitigated gall to do a commentary about Colin Kaepernick, saying he needed to read his book, and said that and here's Bill O'Reilly, white man on Fox News, trying to tell a brother what he needs to learn about patriotism. I don't mean no disrespect to anybody who's white in America, but can't nobody white in America tell anybody black what it means to be a patriot. There is nothing more patriotic to love a country that did not love you. There's nothing more patriotic than to put on a uniform with an American flag on your patch, knowing full well when you came back to this country, you were not going to get treated like a full citizen. There's nothing more patriotic than being an African American going to colleges these days, and you walk out of here with twice the amount of debt as somebody who is white. You're going to schools that don't have the same resources at majority white institutions. If you dare try to even question black folks and patriotism, then I can show you, like I did Bill O'Reilly, a lot of African Americans who've been able to show what it means to be an American. And that's why I respond to Bill O'Reilly saying, Bill, I got some books for you to read. Why am I saying that? It is because we are looking today at a much different situation than what these four young men had to confront in 1960. We are looking now at a moment in time where we are 24 years away when this nation will become a nation majority people of color. In 2043, you will see that African Americans, Latinos, Asians, Native Americans, and others will comprise 53% of the American population. White Americans will comprise 47% of the population. Why is that important? It is important because what we're seeing today in our politics is we are seeing right now what I have been calling for the last 11 years, this moment of white fear, this moment of white minority resistance. Even though in the last election, 71% of the total electorate were white voters, you're seeing that because folk are scared about where we are going. When you see the gerrymandering of districts, it is because people are scared of where we're going. See, where I come from, isn't it amazing how we have folks who want to fight fair and say it should be an equal playing field in baseball, football, basketball, but not in politics? See, where I come from, you put your argument up, I put my argument up. Let's see who can win the best argument. But what I'm not going to do is actually rig the race where I don't have to even put up an argument and still beat you. What we're facing right now is that this generation has to be preparing for that moment when things shift in this country. Then all of a sudden the demographics shift. But the question is, will the demographics shift or will the power stay the same? See, when I look at what is happening with our court system right now, there would not be a black freedom movement, a successful black freedom movement, were it not for federal judges doing what was right and just according to our United States Constitution. And what we must understand is that you have forces today who are still upset because of what those judges did when it came to enforcing the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and the 1965 Voting Rights Act, the 1968 Fair Housing Act. And so what we are seeing right now are individuals who understand that, oh, the demographics will shift in the next 24 years, but we want to ensure that our court system is going to be governed by folks who look and think like us. And so it's a problem when white men make up 31 and 36% of Americans, but you look at the folks who Trump is appointing to the federal bench, nearly 90% of all the federal judges he's appointed have been white men. One Latino, not a single African American. Now, I know some black Republicans. I know a lot of them. And you trying to tell me you can't find one to name as a federal judge? When you have individuals being appointed who can't even affirm Brown versus Board of Education in their hearing. When you have folks who are being appointed to lifetime appointments who have been rated unqualified for the American Bar Association. So I love it when people talk about affirmative action and calling people unqualified. I'm like, yeah, but you got some folk who have been nominated who have no business being on a federal bench. Why does that matter? It matters because the judicial system, that is the last line of defense when it comes to enforcing our laws. And so when Mitch McConnell says that we're going to be appointing young men and women, that is by design. They are purposely looking at individuals who are 35 and 45 years old to ensure they're going to sit on the federal bench for the next 40 to 50 years. Because, see, when we become a nation majority of people of color in 2043, if that person who's 35 and they serve to their 85, that means that when we become a nation majority of people of color, they will still be on the bench another 26 years. That means they want to guarantee in terms of control of this country via the court system. See, you might think that the courts don't matter. In fact, in 2016, there was a sister who called my radio show and she said, you know what, I'm not interested in Trump. I don't care about Hillary. I'm just going to focus on local issues in North Carolina. I said, well, baby, what are your top 3 issues? And then she told me, I said, do you understand that whoever is president has a direct link to the very 3 issues you just raised? She had no idea. And so we have to understand that here we are sitting in places like this. Do we have to realize that were it not for those judges on the Fifth Circuit who took Brown versus Board of Education, the Supreme Court decided, but they had to enforce it. And so when you had folks in North Carolina and South Carolina and Louisiana who were in the legislature passing bills to keep black folks from going to school, NAACP and others were going right to the courts getting injunctions to stop the very law they just passed. And they would pass a law the next day and they would go right back to the same court to get another injunction. And that is every single thing that we have gotten fighting for a bill that was passed on a city, state, or federal level. We had to have the court system to then back up and enforce that very thing when folks were opposing us from doing so. So don't think for a second that what's happening in the federal judiciary does not impact your vote. It impacts your health care. It impacts the environment. It impacts civil rights laws. And so when we look at what is happening in this country, I've been covering this issue for the last couple of weeks. When you have a significant rollback of civil rights protections in the Department of Housing and Urban Development, when you have a plan right now where Ben Carson, who has no business whatsoever being a HUD secretary, I've interviewed Ben. He's a nice guy. He's a phenomenal brain surgeon. But just because you're a brain surgeon don't mean you know a damn thing about housing. I can tell you something right now. You would not want the greatest housing expert operate on your brain. I'm just saying. But when you are sitting in a situation right now where African American home ownership is at its lowest rate since the Fair Housing Act, now think about that. Black home ownership is at the lowest rate in America since it was illegal. And yet you're seeing a rollback. You're seeing a rollback in the Department of Education under Betsy DeVos, who was absolutely clueless. Now, I got no problem saying that. And the reason I have a problem saying it, and I said if she was sitting right here. Because you can't argue with facts. What we are seeing is an assault on the very things folks like these four gentlemen fought for, like their fellow students fought for. We are seeing folks who do not want to see the level of progress, and then they want to get cute with it. And I'm sorry, you cannot support the rolling back of civil rights protections and then dare to say you care about black folks. I simply cannot accept that when I have the proof of what is happening in our face. And one of the first acts when Republicans took over after 2016 was to turn over Obama-era regulations that govern discrimination against black folks in the auto industry. That's one of the first things you turned over? I'm sorry. I'm just trying to figure out if we're trying to end discrimination, but then you want to turn that over. That makes no sense to me. I'm saying all of this because we cannot sit here and be comfortable and somehow believe and come to events like this and thank the folks who did what they did and celebrate without realizing that this generation has to do the exact same thing that they did. And it's not right and it's not fair. It's not right that white students can go to college and just be carefree and take a year off. What they call that, a gap year? You say a gap year to a black parent, I'm like, only way your ass having a gap year, you're going to be in a coma. I know if I went and told my daddy, I need a gap year, my dad was like, yeah, I'm going to knock your ass out. And you're going to be off for a whole year in a coma in a hospital. There wasn't no air between high school graduation and college. Then I really don't know this gap year after you graduate. I graduated on December 18th from Texas A&M University. My graduation party was December 20th. I started at the Austin American Statesman on December 30th. And that was on their decision. Daddy would have had my ass there December 19th. Just saying. Black folks don't talk about gap year. That's a whole different thing. I don't know what Sasha and Malia were doing. I'm like, y'all in a whole different tax bracket. That ain't us. What I need us to understand is that this generation has to accept the call in order to fight, because now is your turn. Last year, when National Association of Black Journalists, when we went after CNN, because CNN had no black executive producers, no black vice presidents, no black senior vice presidents, no black executive vice presidents, no black direct reports, we rained hell on CNN's CEO, Jeff Zucker. And we made it perfectly clear that you are not going to lead this way in 2019. And I called Bernard Shaw because he had spoke about this when we acknowledged him with our Lifetime Achievement Award. And this is what Bernard Shaw told me. He said, Roland, every generation has its moment to agitate. It's your turn. And so for this generation, it's your turn. While there are folks who are in that slower lane and they are walking slower as they've gotten older, they're still on the battlefield, but you're supposed to be in the fast lane. This generation has to be willing to stand up and not ask permission when it comes to fighting, when it comes to leading. Frederick Douglass said, agitate, agitate, agitate. Power concedes nothing without a demand, never have or never will. That is true in 2020. It was true in the 1800s when he said it, which means that we must understand that we cannot look our children in the eyes today and say, I'm doing all I can to ensure you will have the best future possible if we are sitting on the sidelines and not registering and not voting, and not after the vote going to the city council meeting and the school board meeting and going to the state capitol and going to the Congress and putting pressure on the very folk who we put in place. I don't care whether you are a Democrat or a Republican, if you are black or white. After you vote, that's the end of one process and the beginning of another. And there's nobody in here who is elected official who should not know when folks are coming. If any elected official in North Carolina, if they ever see blue and gold, they should be shaking in their boots because they have been put under pressure by folks who are students and graduates of this university. It should not require students and alumni of this school to mobilize and organize when the school is in trouble. No, it should be putting pressure every single day, every single week, every single month, whether they're in session or they're not in session. See, some of y'all didn't want to clap on that because, see, that means getting out of your comfortable position. Do understand, I guarantee you, that's what folks are doing at UNC, at Texas A&M, and the rest of those places. And so we got to be giving folks hell as well because we are constituents as well. People ask me all the time, well, why'd you go to Texas A&M and you didn't go to Prairie View? I said, damn it, Texas A&M was a public institution. My mama and daddy pay taxes. My grandmama and my grandfather pay taxes. And so guess what? That's my school too. I said, I ain't apologizing for going to the school. I said, but guess what? I'm going to put that pressure on them while I'm there. And do think for a second, when I see President Michael Young and then certain things are happening, he will get an email or phone call from me. And I made it perfectly clear to Texas A&M. I said, look, I got 2.5 million social media followers. I will wear y'all the hell out if something ain't right. And I do it every single day. I'm saying that because there is power that is in our hands. I mentioned off the top those who are alphas. And I've said to the Alpha Convention 2 years ago in Baltimore. I said to the AKs in Shreveport. I said to the Deltas in New Orleans. It's the exact same thing. Here we have institutions totaling 2 million members, and there's no reason in the world you do not have school board members, you do not have city council meetings and state capitals, and they see black and gold, and they see purple and gold, and red and white, and blue and gold, and blue and white. They should say, damn, here come those alphas, here come those omegas, here come those deltas. And if you think I'm wrong, go read Dr. King's book, Chaos or Community, Where Do We Go From Here? Where he said there are 4 institutions that are prime position in order to move black America forward. He said the black church, the black press, professional organizations, and black fraternities and sororities. Here we have groups with power, with organized power, groups that are international and national and regional and state, grad, undergrad. And so we have vertical and horizontal leadership. The question is, are we using our power when it comes appropriately? In 2011, when Ohio passed an owner's voter suppression law, they were trying to get signatures to turn it over in 2012. And I was moderating a panel at CBC, a Panhellenic panel put on by Congresswoman Marcia Fudge. And I asked the 9 presidents at the time, how are you mobilizing your members to get the signatures for this very initiative? And everybody looked at me like I was crazy. Nobody knew what I was talking about. And so Congresswoman Marcia Fudge was over there. She was like, move on. I was like, no. They're going to answer this question. It's probably why it's the last time I moderated that panel. And so I kept pressing them, and then all of a sudden they would talk about their voter initiative. I'm like, no, I ain't trying to hear all that because you ain't really doing nothing with it. They had a meeting the next day, and they had a meeting of all the 9 black fraternities and sororities. And they discovered that between out of the 9 of them, they had 120 chapters alone in Ohio. That means that if each chapter of the Divine 9 chose to say, we're going to get 1,000 signatures for the petition, the Divine 9 alone could have been responsible for 1/3 of all of the signatures needed. But see, that's organized power. You're set the exact same way. You have alumni chapters. You have folks who are on Facebook or who are on social media. And so how are we using our power? We have all these organizations. We can name all of them. Frats, sororities, Masons, Eastern Star, Links, Ladies of Distinction. We can go on and on and on. The question is, are we meeting to meet, Or are we meeting to figure out how to use our power in order to change what is going on? I go back to when NABJ went after CNN. CNN thought, oh, clearly it's just NABJ, 4,000 members. Yeah, we're the largest minority journalist organization of color in the world, but they probably figured we were just 4,000. See, they didn't understand. I understand about how do you mobilize and organize. And so we sat there and met, but they didn't realize we were already talking to the CBC. And then the CBC dropped their letter of support of what we were doing. See, they didn't realize that the NAACP had already talked to them, and they had dropped their letter of support. See, also, they didn't understand who they were dealing with. See, I'm not just a member, I'm a life member. And so when I called President Ward saying on a Thursday, I need Alphas to drop a letter of support for NABJ, we got the letter on Friday. And then when the Omegas, we hit them up, they dropped their letter, and the Deltas dropped their letters. Now, some of the other folk who I call, I ain't gonna name no names, Kappas, and I ain't gonna name no names, AKAs, but they didn't drop letters of support. Oh yeah, I call names. Just so y'all know, if you want to be comfortable, you should have invited my wife. She's a minister. She could have prayed with you. She could have laid hands on you. But just so we real clear, God gave my wife a wonderful spirit of comfort, but do understand, God gave me a spirit of discomfort. My job is to make folk uncomfortable, and so if you live uncomfortable, good. I did exactly what I was destined to do. So we dropped those letters on them, and every single week there was another headline, and I had churches lined up, and AT&T was like, look, y'all got to fix this thing. And so they appointed one sister. We said, no, it ain't good enough. Then the next week they appointed a brother. We said, no, it ain't good enough. Then another appointment the next week, and we kept putting pressure on them. Because see, I'm not interested in you promoting one African American. No, you got to do better than that. Because not one of us just watching your network. And see, I understood how you take organizational power and then begin to use that and flex that. And so that's where we must be in 2020. How are we using our collective power? Because you cannot just speak solely as an individual or as a group or as even a university alumni or even student body. When we were in Maryland fighting for the settlement of the HBCU lawsuit there, they should be getting $1 billion, but they said, fine, we'll settle for $577 million. Yet Governor Larry Hogan proposed $200 million. And so we began to work with folks and organize a rally at the state capitol that took place in December. And see, they must have thought we forgot. No, we didn't forget, because I said then we will be back. And I told the Democrats, the largest delegation of black elected officials, the largest black caucus on any state in the country in Maryland, I said, y'all should come back when in session and tell Democrats we not voting on a single bill unless y'all approve this money for these HBCUs in Maryland. A $200 million settlement over 10 years comes down to $20 million a year for HBCUs, $5 million each. Absolutely unacceptable. And so I made it clear we will be back. But see, that's what I'm simply saying. Other HBCU communities should be standing with what's happening in Maryland. Because when Maryland gets their money, like Mississippi got their money 20 years ago, and North Carolina can be properly funded. And then schools that are in Georgia can be properly funded. Then schools in other states can be properly funded. What I'm saying is exactly what took place here in North Carolina when 4 students had a sit-in, which led to a massive wildfire spreading like all across the South. The same thing can happen in the 21st century if we are willing to start something in one place. What I'm trying to get you to understand, you cannot talk about this, what took place here, as an isolated situation. 4 students who decided to sit in changed what happened all across the South in a matter of weeks. Now tell me, how in the world can 4 freshmen launch an initiative, go the next day, followed by other students without Twitter, without Facebook, without Instagram, without Snapchat, without LinkedIn, without any of that, and change and transform what happened all across the South? I dare say this generation must have the same focus and tenacity and be willing to say, what are we trying to change today? What do we want to change now? And I dare say, North Carolina A&T, you can start it here and then impact at the next school, and the next school, and the next school, and the next city. Whether you're a frat, a sorority, whether you're non-Greek, just student body, it can happen today. And then when people are gathering in 25 years from now, when they're coming for the 100th anniversary, they should not come back solely celebrating the 4. They should be saying, here's what a group of folks did in 2020 to change the legacy and the future of African Americans in this city, in this state, in this country. It requires you to fight. It requires you to organize and mobilize and understand you might have to swing on some folks, but like my frat brother Vertner Woodson Tandy said, we will fight until hell freezes over, then we will fight on the ice.
Amazing. Wow. That was absolutely amazing. I think Mr. Martin deserves another round of applause for those very invigorating words. I hope everyone walks away remembering to ask themselves first, can I, and not others, as well as to create the platform yourself so that the next generation is able to use their voice. Thank you once again, Mr. Martin. It is my pleasure to welcome our visionary leader, Chancellor Harold L. Martin Sr., to award this year's Human Rights Medal.
Good morning. You know, it's always a pleasure to have an opportunity to be engaged in these kinds of celebratory activities. And as always, our speaker inspires me as they've inspired you. And so I took a significant number of notes. I'll only regurgitate just a few key points by Roland Martin this morning. And I just want to say, Roland, you obviously pulled out of some of the experiences of your spouse when you concluded your message with the cadence in true fashion of that Baptist preacher. I just want to say, as you suggested, I'm just saying. But let me share some of the key points I thought were worth sharing again. There were a significant number of them, and I won't do them all. But I think it's critically important for our students who are present in this audience and those we have the privilege of serving here at North Carolina A&T. And I'll start with the one that struck me very profoundly initially. I don't ask others. I ask myself. And he then moved on to share a significant number of other key points. As we move to a nation that is quickly becoming majority-minority, we are losing our voices. I want you to remember that point as you leave today. I understand the power of deciding what stories are important to our communities, and we must tell those stories time and time again. There is immense African American talent all across this nation, and we, universities like ours, and our communities must enable these talented young people to have a voice. I hate it when young folk say, and I quote, "When are you old folk going to pass the baton and get out of the way?" I have heard that a time or two from some of our students in conversation. There's always been great reverence paid to elders. I don't know about you. When I grew up in my household, I got a quick slap across the face when I did not show reverence to elders as I engaged them. It is important for us elders to not suppress, though, the energy and passion of our young people. There is a balance. Those who continue to make a difference in our nation are those who dare not to ask permission. We are looking at a different set of conditions today than those experienced by the A&T 4. And I conclude with this key point. This generation has to stand up and not ask permission. Let's give Roland Martin another round of applause for exceptional comments shared with us today. Thank you very much. And speaking of our young people, I certainly want you to help me thank our young people today for the remarkable job they've done in hosting our program and planning our program today. Thank you. 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 And I don't know about you, but I was particularly moved by the A&T Fellowship Gospel Choir and their renditions this morning. So we ought to give them a round of applause as well. Thank you. Before I do the task I was assigned to do, I certainly want to recognize one additional individual in this audience whom I have come to have great admiration for, and many of you know, but has not been given an opportunity to be recognized this morning. That is Chancellor Emeritus Edward Ford. Please stand and be recognized at this moment. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Ed Ford. So it's my pleasure this morning again to take this opportunity to recognize the highest honor that North Carolina A&T State University bestows upon an individual or individuals, the Human Rights Medal. The Human Rights Medal is awarded annually to recognize individuals who strive to correct social injustice and who have contributed to the betterment of the world. The award honors individuals whose courageous actions are a reflection of the extraordinary tactics demonstrated by the then freshman Ezell A. Blair, Jr., Franklin Eugene McCain, Joseph Alfred McNeil, and David Richmond, Jr. Now, before I announce this year's recipient, we have a number of representatives who are awardees of the Human Rights Medal who are with us this morning. They were recognized a few moments ago amongst other honorees and dignitaries. But I'd love to have all of our Human Rights Medal awardees who are present with us this morning stand, please, so that we can again recognize you appropriately. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now I'm honored to present the 2020 Human Rights Medal to Representative Alma Adams. Representative Alma Adams. Now, I've got a lot more to say about her, so you may want to pace your accolades and applause. But Representative Alma Adams began her political career in the 1980s by becoming the first African-American woman elected to the Greensboro City School Board. It was then that she made a lifetime commitment to effecting social change in her community and beyond. Adams served 9 years on the Greensboro City Council. Throughout her service to the 2nd District in Greensboro, Adams worked to create safe and affordable housing and promote the revitalization of neighborhoods. In 1994, Adams was appointed by her peers to serve in the North Carolina House District 26 seat. She went on to serve 10 terms in the State House. During her tenure, she rose to become chairwoman of the North Carolina Legislative Black Caucus and was instrumental in passing legislation that improved the climate for quality, affordable health care in the state and the first $3.1 billion bond referendum that impacted the University of North Carolina and this university in particular. Adams also pioneered the Displaced Homemakers Bill, which provided provisions and services to displaced homemakers, and in 2006 successfully spearheaded the state's first minimum wage increase in 9 years. Adams was elected to her third term representing the 12th Congressional District of North Carolina on November 6, 2018. She is the 100th woman elected to the 113th Congress and serves on the House Committees of Education and Labor, Financial Services and Agriculture. She chairs the Higher Education and Labor Subcommittee on Workforce Protections and is vice chair of the Agriculture Committee. Adams is founder and co-founder and co-chair of the Congressional Bipartisan Historically Black Colleges and University Caucus to promote bipartisan legislation that supports HBCUs and their graduates. Since its inception, the caucus has coordinated the Diversity in Tech program, which fosters engagement, collaboration, and partnership between the Fortune 500 companies, government, and the industry leaders and HBCUs. The first Diversity in Tech conference was hosted here at North Carolina A&T. Approximately 40 tech companies and 25 institutions represented at this event. She fostered additions to the Farm Bill, which includes $40 million to HBCUs for scholarship funding, funding for newly established centers of excellence in agriculture, and an additional funding for agricultural research and cooperative extension for 1890 land-grant universities, a critical part that supports this institution and the role it plays, not only in this region, this state, but the nation as a whole. Established the annual HBCU Brain Trust, which allows faculty, staff, students from historically black colleges to visit the nation's capital to promote their institutions with government officials and corporate leaders. Last year, Representative Adams, along with Representative Mark Walker, introduced the Fostering Undergraduate Talent by Unlocking Resources for Education Act, the Futures Act as we know it, to ensure continued funding for minority-serving institutions, including HBCUs. On December 20th, the Future Act was enabled to permanently guarantee $255 million a year for these institutions over the next 10 years or so. Thank you. As Representative Adams always suggests, she graduated from the North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University in 1968, where she also received her master's degree in art education in 1972. Long before she earned her PhD in art education and multicultural education from the Ohio State University in 1981. For 40 years, Adams taught art at Bennett College in Greensboro, North Carolina. While at Bennett, she led the effort to increase student civic participation, coining the phrase, Bennett bells are voting bells, and organizing annual marches to the polls. Throughout her career, Adams has promoted quality education for all students, spearheading legislation to boost funds for historically black colleges and universities. She is a proud mother of one daughter, one son, and 4 grandchildren. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome to the podium and join me in congratulating Representative Alma Adams. Now, you know she has I think she said the other day, 1,203 hats. So I wanted you to know that I was doing everything I could to not damage one of those 1,203 hats. Again, congratulations, Congresswoman Alma Adams.
Good morning. I thought I'd wear a smaller hat, Dr. Martin, so we wouldn't have too much trouble getting the medal on, but it's pretty heavy. Can I get an Aggie pride? Aggie pride. Chancellor Martin, thank you so much for your kind words, and most especially, thank you for your support, for your personal friendship, and the stellar leadership that you continue to provide to our great university. I too want to acknowledge President Emeritus Dr. Ford, who was my president when I was here, one of the two I think I had. But I also want to bring you greetings today from the 116th Congress, the more than 800,000 residents of the 12th Congressional District now in Mecklenburg County. I acknowledge my colleague in Congress, Mark Walker, thank you for being here. Also to all of the trustees and those who work on behalf of this university, to the alums. I do bring you greetings as well from our Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, and all of my colleagues there, and 54 members of the Congressional Black Caucus, known as the conscience of the Congress, and you got to have one of those these days. But I want to thank you, Greensboro, first of all, for allowing me to represent you for more than 3 decades. I got my start here. I won't forget that. You helped me get my grounding. And so I've got to tell you, though, with all of the turbulence in Washington, D.C., first of all, I'm glad I'm out there today. But with all of the turbulence going on, and I looked at the theme that the students have, from the lunch counter to the streets, that is so appropriate. And when you get in the streets, make sure you go to the polls. But before you get there, make sure that you're registered, as Roland and as President Martin has said, you know, because if you're not registered, you can't vote. If you don't vote, you're not counted. And if you're not counted, guess what? You're not going to be heard. And we need to make sure that we continue to be heard. I am so humbled and pleased and extremely honored today to receive the 2020 Human Rights Medal from my alma mater twice, North Carolina A&T State University. You know, it was 56 years ago. I know I don't look like it, right? When I stepped on this campus, poor black girl growing up in the ghetto of Newark, New Jersey, North Carolina A&T made a committed investment in me. They molded and shaped me into what they knew I could become. Now, I want to recognize my family for being here and let them stand up. My brother's here, my sister, my daughter is here, and her husband, and my cousin, my first cousin, Francis. You all stand up, so. They didn't give me enough tickets to bring everybody. So those who are in the area came by. But my mom did domestic work. She cleaned other folks' houses, so I wouldn't have to do that. But she was smart enough to know that education would be my pathway. She didn't finish high school. She didn't attend an HBCU or any CU for that matter. But I can tell you, with all of the work and the focus that I've continued to have on education, I do it because of the nurturing that I got from my mother, but also I do it because I know the value of our schools. And I hear so often sometimes, Dr. Martin, people say, why do you need HBCUs? And you know what, Roland, I tell them, what in the hell would we do without our HBCUs? And to all of our chancellors and presidents and administrators and those who are here from our HBCUs, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for working alongside of us here in the Congress and helping us to continue to pave the way for our schools. Chancellor Martin is correct that $255 million is permanent in our budget. You know, we don't always get to do that. But it's important that our schools are sustained and maintained, and that our students have the kind of future that we know they can have. And so let me just say, Roland, thank you so much for all that you do, for speaking truth to power. I've been on your show many times. I really appreciate that. To the A&T 4, to their families, to all of the community leaders, and to the students and faculty and staff, and all who have come today because you love education, you love this university, and to celebrate the 6 decades that are embodied in a legacy of justice that was initiated by these 4 freshman students who sat down at the Woolworth counter in 1960 for the sake of justice and humanity, who sparked the civil rights movement that was heard around the world, and who provided opportunities for all of us as a people to continue to stand up, to speak up, and as I say sometimes, and I'm going to cut up too, but we got to make sure that we stay woke, as the young folks say. Now, I've got to tell you something. You know, I've had questions about how long I've served to and getting out of the way, and I'm not quite in the slow lane yet, and I'm not in the fast lane, but I'm still moving. And I've got to tell you that it is so important that you have the continuity. And if you think about it, it took me 9 years of working in the North Carolina House to get a $1 increase in the committee that I chair in education today. We are looking at increasing the minimum wage, and I think it's going to be on the floor in another week. But you've got to have some continuity. So I've got to tell you, there's something that is necessary about that slow lane and those of us who may be in that slow lane. Because I've got to tell you, had I not been in the North Carolina House for those 20 years, the Lord has blessed me. He's brought me from school board to Congress, and I thank him each and every day. But had I not been there, that $3.1 billion bond referendum for our universities may not have happened. So there's something about it now. And then let me just say this. You know, we've got an election coming up, but there were so many people during the last election talking about my speaker, who I call the wall, Nancy Pelosi. And they said, oh, well, we need some younger leadership. Now, I've got to tell you, we wouldn't be where we are, I think, had it not been for Nancy Pelosi. And I don't even think she's in the slow lane. But let me just move on to say that what a privilege it is to be back on this campus, the largest HBCU in the nation, the place that gave me my start 56 years ago. You know, this institution, as I said, made a committed investment in me, and HBCUs across this country are continuing to make those investments in our students. I was a first-generation college student, and there's still many first-generation students coming this way. And so we want to continue to make sure that our schools continue to survive and that they thrive. And I got to tell you, I don't want to see another HBCU close. And you know what? And most of them, if you look at the history, have closed because of money. Not because of educational deficiency, academic deficiencies, but because of resources. And those resources have not been equitable. And that's my pledge to you, that I'm going to continue to work. We have now 96 members in the bipartisan HBCU caucus. We have 54 members of the CBC, the Congressional Black Caucus. And we are continuing to work to ensure that we can live up to what W.E.B. Du Bois said. When he said of all of the civil rights for which the world has struggled and fought for 500 years, the right to learn is undoubtedly the most fundamental. And so we're going to continue to make sure that this fundamental right continues to be a right for those who need it. I owe a debt of gratitude to this institution. I pledge to do my part. I'm going to continue to prioritize my work in the U.S. House to ensure that our schools continue to move and do what we need to do. And you know, I guess that's just what Aggies do. But, but as long as I can move in the slow lane or the middle lane, and if I'm moving too slow, Roland, I'm going to move over. But I'm going to get out when I believe it's time, when the Lord tells me that I need to stop. But I've got to just say that, you know, it's not how long you serve, it's how well you serve. And I just want to just remind the students that it's really all about power. And power is what makes the difference in lives and communities. And the first thing that you have to understand, young folks, about power and how to get it, you don't ask somebody how to get it or where it is or can you have it. You take it. And once you've taken it, you use it. You've got great examples in the Greensboro Four, but you can stand today and, you don't have to ask permission. I really like that. You don't have to ask permission. And I just want to say, as I've had an opportunity to share and to talk with so many of my colleagues in the Congress, John Lewis, who got into, as he said, good trouble. Just think about it that way, because we're in a time that is so turbulent. And I think that we can make America great again, but I'm working on making the White House great again, and I think that will do it. But let me again thank you for this medal. It is truly an honor for me to receive it. I am humbled at the thought, and at first I wasn't going to come to the breakfast, and it was supposed to be a surprise, and I said, no, I don't think I'm going to be able to get there because I got to speak the next day, and then they had to tell me. But thank you so very much. Thank you all, and Roland, thank you for that powerful, powerful message, and you need to stop talking about Alpha Kappa Alpha women. I appreciate that. I'll tell you that right now. But thank you all so very much. Let us continue to plant the seeds of progress today, because it's really not about those of us who are in that slow lane today. It's about those who are moving on for the future. Because somebody once said that a community can only grow great when old men and old women plant trees under which we know we will never sit. Thank you. God bless.
Congratulations again, Congresswoman Adams. We will now see a video presentation, the A&T 4 in their own words.
One evening in the room, we start talking. That something should be done. Something should be done. But how can you fight a system?
First thing we had to learn was to be nonviolent. Very difficult. But we embraced concepts like nonviolence and use it to avail.
There were some things that bothered me as a young boy about this democracy of ours that was not real to a lot of people.
We even went to the library and checked on some of the statutes in the North Carolina law book about this. And we realized that we wasn't breaking the law, civil disobedience. That was all. In fact, the police, when they came down, they didn't know what to do. They just stood there. Scared. I was.
I'm glad, thank God, that we were protected from all danger, but we were dealing with a psychological war. It wasn't how big we was, how great we were committed to a cause.
We had an idea of the risk that we were pursuing, and as Frank said often, Frank McCain, that we weren't sure how we would leave that Woolworth store February 1st. We might leave in a pine box. We might leave upright as soldiers, but we believed very strongly in what we were doing.
And through a lot of hard work, a lot of danger, and at a human price and sacrifice, and I don't bemoan that, and I seek no sympathy for it, we changed the course of history relative to civil rights in this country.
We came to campus and some students heard what we had done, so we formed what is called the Student Executive Committee for Justice. That name came from a man named Ralph Johns. Joseph had this idea in his mind before he met Ralph Johns. Then Joseph brought to us a book by Langston Hughes called A Pictorial History of the American Negro. This book, written by Langston Hughes, guess what his birthday is? February 1, he wrote the book that Joseph brought to us. So that's the beginning of some things what we call enlightenment that happened to me over the last 50 years.
We were pleasantly surprised. We knew we were going to win in the long term because we weren't going to give up until we'd won. Woolworths decided that what they needed to do was integrate all their stores throughout the country. And they didn't do it because somebody paid them money. They gave, and they gave freely, and it was not it was a we type of thing. It wasn't about me. We couldn't have possibly have known all the positive repercussions from sitting in at a lunch counter, not knowing fully the impact it would have. We knew that we were fortunate to have some bright people in our midst. We did the right things. My counsel would be, carry yourself with dignity. Respect mankind.
If we don't communicate with each other, there's no progress. We must go forward together.
If there's something that you want to do and in your heart, you know that it needs to be changed,
Dr. McNeil, Mr. McCain, and Mr. Richmond, for your courage and dedication to inspire the current and emerging social justice leaders of the 21st century.
You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it. You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.
This is Diala Riddle, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered. Stay woke.
This is Director X, the director of Superfly on the red carpet, or the black carpet, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Yo, what up, y'all? This is Jay Ellis, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Hi, I'm Chaley Rose, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
I'm Lex Scott Davis, and you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your boy Jacob Lattimore, and you're now watching Roland Martin right now.
Hey fam, want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? The blackest show on all of digital, cable, and broadcast. Check out our audio podcast. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Press play. Martin.
Unfiltered.